a kind of volatile or persistent storage. It can be also be others who can access the same elements in this. So these are the attacks, virtualization security attacks in this. So how this security, you need to understand the physical security as well as the virtual security. There are some kinds of differences also there. So especially physical security means that is a personal, or it is a hardware security, or a personal computer security, or software security, or we can say network security, and some kind of data from the physical actions. And so it is events on the, it could cause serious loss of damage to enterprise also, agency like institution or anything. So the protection from this file, or protection from this any kind of a kind of disasters or theft or terrorism or anything, these are all physical security kind of issues. But virtual security appliance is it is a computer, purely computer related, that run inside the virtual environment. So appliance, because it is just already pre-packaged all the hardware operating systems and security applications and run on the virtual hardware. So this is the difference between this. So in tradition, these are the differences between, and there are some kind of virtual threats also you need to understand. Some kind of threats on virtual systems in very general and very in natural, as they are very inherent threats to all computerized systems, like as we know, denial of services, DOS, some kind of other attacks. Other threats also having vulnerabilities. However, they are unique to the virtual machines. So many virtual machines vulnerabilities also they can system. This is exploiting the attack or other virtual machine systems or the host systems, as multiple virtual machines share the same physical hardware during that time. So there are some kind of vulnerabilities, the malicious minded individual regarding security in this environment. So there are few, there is a shared clipboard is one of the vulnerable activity on the virtual machines. So shared clipboard technology allows data to be transferred between virtual machines and the host, providing a means of moving data between the malicious programs in virtual machine on different security realms. And also keystroking logins. This is also another issue. Some of the virtual machine technologies, they will enable the logging of keystrokes and the screen updates also to be passed across the virtual machines in the virtual machine, and they will write the host files and permitting and sometimes they are monitoring of encrypted terminals which are connection and their connections inside the virtual machines. These are all the issues in the keystroke and virtual monitoring from the host also. These are the also because of all the networks, as we know, the packets are coming from and going to virtual machine, pass through the host only. So the host may be able to affect sometimes the virtual machine by some of the regions, like either starting or pausing or restart virtual machines, or monitoring sometimes during the configuration resource available or to the machine, or including CPU and some kind of memory or disk or network usage of. So these are the effects by anywhere the effect may come by using this kind of virtual thread. So during the monitoring the application running inside the virtual machine, while we are there viewing, or while they are copying, while they are modifying the data, also the virtual disks, virtual threads may be attacking in this line also. So virtual machine monitoring from virtual machine is also usually those virtual machines are not able to be directly accessed once another virtual disk on the host. So that is also a kind of a threat. And virtual machine backdoors also, this backdoors, they converts this channel or the communication between the guest and host could also allow some kind of intruders to perform potentially dangerous operations. So these are the uh, threats on that. So what are the, now let us discuss about the attacks on the virtualization. There are many attacks on the virtualization platform, especially in the cloud environment. So we will see there are many components in virtualization. There are many layers. Layered architecture is also every level. There are a kind of attacks. So every component of virtualization layer, it can act as an attack vector. We can call it as to launch multiple attacks on the system. So attacks, they can target different components of virtual environment. They may have results in the security issues also, such like as compromise of this cloud infrastructure and stealing of customers' data and system hacking. So these are all attacks. So there are different types of attack scenarios in the virtual environment, especially in the cloud. So according to this, we have some kind of attacks like, the service provider attack is the first one in that. This kind of, if the attacker has a physical access to the cloud hardware, he may run malicious programs or code in the system to damage the virtual machines by modifying the source of the code and changing their functionality with the help of the physical access to the system. So the attackers can also launch cross virtual mission channels attacks. So these attacks may include a CPU or the maybe cache leaking to measure the load of other virtual web server on the network. Moreover, if access control is not implemented properly, so different administrators like network administrator and virtual administrator, they might be access the customer's data that they are not authorized to access. But these activities will result in the security, the compromises such as loss of the data and loss of the confidentiality and unauthorized traffic monitoring. So these systems, so service provider has to ensure that any software deployed on cloud, they are built using proper coding practices. Otherwise, this kind of attacks are quite common. When they are writing code that can be result in web application attack, like for example, when you are using SQL injection or cross-site scripting or denial of service kind of services and code execution, etc. like this. So alert logic report shows all these web applications to be the most common attacks on the cloud environment. So impact almost more than 50% of the customers are facing this kind of service provider attacks. So the other attack is called hypervisor attack. So a cloud can the cloud generally can lease or rent generally virtual machines to install a malicious guest OS, like this will attack, compromise whatever the hypervisors by changing its resource code in order to gain the access to the the memory or data or code of virtual machines present in the system. So these hypervisors also, its increased code size has resulted, in the implementation of vulnerabilities. So to control this kind of complete virtualization environment, so the malicious hypervisors as I mentioned, Blue Pill or Rootkit and Vitrol and some VIR, they are already installed on the fly, but which gives attacker the host privileges to modify the control virtual machines. So this technique is used malicious software to take complete control of the operating system by hiding itself from the administrator. Just looks like the host side, and also the attacks on hypervisor at the guest side. So guest side operating system is also gain some type of unauthorized access to other virtual machines like or hypervisor. So this is also, we can call it as a kind of VM escapes, or we can call it as a jailbreak attacks. As the so escapes, it is a confinement of virtual machines into a kind of layers. Otherwise, unknown this or they are very unknown to the virtual machine. Such kind of attacks. So this is most you know uh, a dangerous attack on the hypervisor, since because usually attacker can only compromise a virtual remotely as the underlying host operating system is invisible. However, since many virtual machines share the same kind of physical resources, if the attacker is on the virtual security, the clouds, the virtual security resources, and there are so many physical resources, the attacker can attack all the virtual machines. This hypervisor is the one. So there are many other kinds of attacks also there. Virtualization in cloud. So in the cloud environment, it takes. So these are the issues. These are the major issues in the cloud. So virtual machine attacks and some kind of attacks are also known as encryption type of attacks during the network in the virtual machines, and other type of attacks also a kind of not only these four, and migration attack is also an attack during the migration from one place to another place. This attack is also exploits on this multiple. And also there are other kind of virtual library checkout, a kind of attack on virtual. So let us go to the next level. So the most in this virtualization in cloud computing, the most neglected aspect of any organization is its physical security only the main problem. These advanced social engineers, they can take an advantage of this weak physical security policies of any organization. They has to put they put in their place. Thus, it is very important to have a consistent and context aware security policy when it comes to controlling access to the data centers, especially when they are using the cloud services. So traffic between the virtual machines, it needs to be monitored closely by using at least they have to follow a few standard monitoring tools so that they can watch. So this physical security, it is a time to check whether the security on the inside, some kind of gateways, well configured gateways also should be able to enforce this security when they are on the virtual machine is reconfigured or migrated or added. So this will also help to prevent virtual machine sprawl and virtual machine rogues. So another approach is also in this. It might be helpful to enhance internal security. Is also the use the third party validation checks or it performed according to the security standards. So we can see that the service provider and also the cloud provider work together, and they are have to some bound. There is a kind of service level agreement. So the cloud is also the used to run on various instances, as whereas the service and users pay for each use inside the cloud is used. So this approach that can be used to check the integrity for virtual systems running inside the cloud. So checking virtual systems and integrity capabilities and monitoring and securing environments. It all these required this kind of integrity checking and increasing. It will increase the protection against the data losses within the virtual machines. So the server on the cloud, you may also deploy all type of web applications in this scenario also. So vulnerability check will have to be performed. So data on the cloud, it should be encrypted, as we know, with the suitable encryption and with a kind of data protection algorithms. So these algorithms, we can check the integrity of the user's profile and how the access files on these virtual machines protecting. And also it provides a kind of, it depends on. So there are some kind of security requirements also we need. Uh, so let us see some kind of architectural design, how these architectural designs are helping a kind of architecture, virtual machine architecture, and multiple virtual systems also they have a kind of. So security requirements, different virtualization approaches they can be applied to various systems layers, like including the hardware and architecture and operating system, as well as the software and also memory and storage and other data and networks. So there are kind of virtualization uh, during the manufacturing time. The virtual machine have some kind of architecture. There are two types of architecture. So type 1 hypervisor is a one type of architecture. This is, we can call it as we can call it is a full virtualization architecture. In this architecture, the hypervisor virtual machines running on whatever the hypervisors, that directly interacts with the hardware. And the other type of bare model is uh, a type 2 hypervisor. This is another type of architecture. This is also full virtualization, but it work with the host OS instead of the hypervisor. So this is what the difference between these two types of architectures. So based on the minimum set of components, it is actually classified based on the environment. So type 1 hypervisor and type 2 hypervisors. So type 1 will never does not have any host operating system, because they are installed on a bare systems. In type 2 type of hypervisor, it is a software interface, like it will emulate the devices which with a system normally interacts. So like the containers, the Microsoft hypervisor and VMware Fusion and virtual server, and Windows also have virtual PC and VMware workstations. So these are the examples of this type 2 hypervisor architectures. So this is the architectural issues. Now let us see the types of hardware virtualization. So there are different types of hardware virtualization also there. One is full virtualization. A full virtualization is a first architectural issue. This is completely simulated, like the guest software does not require any modification to run in this full virtualization. And emulation virtualization is another kind of architecture. This virtual machine simulates the hardware, and hence it becomes the independent of it. In this guest operating system, it does not require any modifications in this emulation. So directly it will run on the virtual. And the last one architecture, it is called para virtualization. So in this, the hardware is not simulated at all. So the guest software run their own isolated domains, they will run. So this is the one. So now let us see some of the security requirements. What kind of security requirements? So there are service provider security requirement, service provider level, and hypervisor required also. And there are some virtual mission security. So there are the four types of securities. Guest image requirements are there. Let us see what are those requirements in the security requirements. So there are service provider attacks. If the attacker has the physical access to the cloud hardware, he may run malicious programs, or he may run any code in that in the system to damage the virtual machine by modifying the source code, or by changing their functionality. Or so with the help of this physical access to the system, the attackers can also launch cross virtual machines, side channel attacks. So these attacks may launch even the CPU cache leakage to measure and load of other virtual web services. Like if the access control is not implemented properly, different administrators like network and virtual administrators, they can access the customer's data that they are not authorized to it. So this is a kind of attack. Service provider has to ensure that the software which is deployed on that particular cloud, which are built using this proper code practicing or not, they have to make sure. And the requirements. So what are the service level agreements, the service provider requirements on the cloud? This cloud service provider on cloud virtual security has also not actually having the security providing secure virtualization in the hardware. Service providers, they must limit the access of the hardware resources. Otherwise, so the service provider will also need to provide a strong authentication mechanisms to the users. Also, they have to make sure the security and all other kind of developments of trusted computing systems, like economy of the mechanism, or mediation, or open design, or privileges, or any other acceptable. It must be followed by the service provider. He has to maintain all these kind of the requirements during the cloud virtualization hardware or service. The service providers has to take care of this. And other one is the hypervisor requirements. It also provides a kind of resource management, some kind of functions that sharing the hardware resources like between the virtual machines. So hypervisors also must maintain a isolation, between the virtual machines and supporting multiple kind of multiplexing of multiple virtual machines on a single hardware platform. So it must also ensure that no application from any virtual machine can directly take control of it as a host to modify the source code hypervisor and other virtual machine in the network. The hypervisor should also monitor the guest operating system and also its applications also which is running in the virtual, if also always to detect any suspicious behavior also. These are the requirements of the hypervisor. So the programs which are that control on the hypervisor, it must be securing using similar kind of practices used in that particular security programs running on the servers. So similarly, access to the hypervisor to be it must be restricted. Otherwise, the security measures to secure hypervisor, it includes installing, updating to the hypervisor and restricting administrator access to the hypervisor management, some kind of interfaces, and they will. So these are the requirements of this side, and virtual machine requirements. Also, we have some kind of virtual machine requirements. Uh, so to secure the the guest voice which is running in the virtual machines, in best practices for the security of any physical missions, it must be followed that including the updating operating system regularly for the the patches and whatever the updates using in antivirus software or securing the internet and other email monitoring of the guest OS. Regularly they have to monitor and they have to understand the communication between the remote users and the guest virtual machines. So they also have to make sure the domain level kind of the guest virtual machines without tampering them. So these are the responsibilities of this. They must also have some kind of a confidential. It must not be tampered during the through operating system or through network or through any other domain. So they have to make sure all the privileges before their acts. These are the requirements of the virtual guest. And the last requirement is the guest image requirement is also a kind of requirement. So the guest operating system images can be moved generally and distributed very easily so that they can be protected from unauthorized access like tampering or storage. So to securely to manage these guest operating system images, they must be examined and updated regularly according to the requirements. Unnecessary images not to be created, and if any image is useless, it must be removed from the system. So whenever virtual machine is migrated from one physical machine to another, like if so, images on previous disks should be also completely removed. So similarly, uh, disk old disk should also be removed before they are discarded. So, and furthermore, there are many other backups of these virtual machines. Images must be maintained, and this virtual machine, there is a kind of checkpoints. These checkpoints, it is also a feature of that allows the user to take a kind of snapshot of a virtual machine image. in that particular storage. So this snapshot also records the state of running the images which they are containing all these components on the guest OS. So virtual, this snapshot access also should be given authorized users to checkpoint. It must be only to run on the virtual machines. So these are the responsibilities of this uh, security. So the next question is, who is responsible for this virtualization security in? So we now, so far what we discussed, all types of threats and attacks and requirements and all types of the cloud environment requirements we discussed. Now let us see who is responsible for virtualization security in this. So when implementing any cloud projects, so security is one of the most important issues, as we all know that. So it requires companies to identify and understand the risks into these risks in digitization or public networks or any outsourcing of infrastructure components. Everywhere the companies still fear that their data is insecure with the cloud systems. So because IT professionals, they wanted to apply the same level of security to their cloud deployments also as they do, to internal resources. But many businesses, many business leaders view this type of providers' responsibility. So who is responsible? But true cloud security requires collaborative effort. So uh, as more and more organizations are migrating, to the virtualization, because everybody wants to live in the virtualization fashion, because it is very cheaper and it is very inexpensive and commoditative also, the machine in the cloud, which is very commoditative software. So it drives cloud services and also the customer how the cloud will impact their privacy and security and compliances. So the first, the cloud service customers must understand when how their cloud service provider delivers a secure solution, that they have to understand first. The secondly, these cloud service customers must consider their new role in the cloud security in the virtual platform. So some cloud service customers mistakenly believe that when they migrate to the cloud, their cloud security are responsible also shift, but it will not be shift ever, never. So, some kind of responsibilities, and you have to understand who is responsible for this cloud security and what do you even need in this cloud security. So these things we have to discuss. We need to understand for anyone in the virtual platform through. So the corporations, they make a kind of mistake in believing that when they are migrating to the cloud, the responsibility also shift, the security automatically shift to the cloud provider. But users, they will presume their company policy, they will keep them safe. The customers assume they can use the same password as every SaaS accounts, like software as a service account they have. So without ill effect. So they are all wrong actually. So we must note that the cloud security is the entire ecosystem of the people, processes, and also there is a lot of policies and the technologies that serve to protect their data applications which operate in the cloud. So the responsibility is here, is shared one, and shared between the organizations. The cloud provider is also responsible, and all its users also are responsible. So while data can be safe in the cloud, everyone with the access to that affect whether it is remains safe or not. So cloud security must be everyone's responsibility. So that is what who is responsibility means. There is no such there is a responsibility breakdown. If you share responsibility breakdown, private cloud responsibility is there, and the responsibility breakdown. So there are two types of the the responsibilities actually divided in the cloud provider. Right? So the cloud provider is typically is responsible for security of the cloud, meaning is the cloud infrastructure. What is including the security at the storage or computing or networking service layers, everything. So the enterprise assumes this responsibility for security in the cloud. This includes all types of applications, services, whatever it is. However, it is depending on the cloud infrastructure. So there are types of private, public, or we can say SaaS. All are responsibility varies between the cloud vendors and organizations. So these are the kind of responsibility. So the private people, private clouds responsibility. What type of responsibility? Those who are giving the what services through private clouds, like Twitter or YouTube's, or they have their own. In private clouds, the enterprises are responsible for all aspects of security of the cloud because it is hosted within their own data centers. So this includes the physical network infrastructure, hypervisor, as well as the virtual network operating systems. And also they have firewalls and other types of service configuration, identity and access management, etc. So those the enterprise also owns the data and the security of the data. They have to make sure and they have to protect their own data at their level in their private clouds. And in the public cloud responsibility also we need to understand public cloud like AWS or any Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud. So these are the cloud vendors. They owns the infrastructure. Also they have physical network and hypervisor also. So the enterprise here, they have to owns their own workloads and applications or virtual network access to their tenant, the customers environment and the data. So they are also responsible to make sure who are their customers and how to give the access to over the virtual machines through cloud. So SaaS vendors also their service software service vendors also primarily they are also responsible for the security of their platform because which includes physical security as well as the infrastructure and also application security also they have to maintain. So these vendors do not own the customer's data nor assume the responsibility for how the customers are use the applications. So as such the enterprise is responsible for security that would prevent and minimize the risks of some kind of malicious data and accidental exposure or malware insertions or something. So while responsibility for securing the data, apps and manufacturing, all these more falls under the hands of the cloud vendor as in the businesses, the transaction from private cloud to public cloud or SaaS, it is important note to make sure to ensuring the security of its own data, always the responsibility of the enterprise. So these are the security responsibilities, and also a kind of these are the responsibilities who are responsible for this. Whoever the service providers, the private providers, SaaS providers, and public, they are all responsible to protect, during the communication, which is during the service which is taken from the cloud through virtual machines. And also there is a kind of security measures also there, shared responsibility management issues also there in this because of this security and privacy concern. moving the data to the cloud, and many clouds and SaaS vendors have also focused on the securing the security, and also the organization's infrastructure and data also. So especially these SaaS vendors means this software as a service provider, they will invest significantly in building a strong defense for their own infrastructure, as they sometimes extend this security to the customer data with basic policy controls. However, these are the typically not sufficient, and organizations also forced to look for more complete kind of SaaS security solutions. So the security gaps not added by the SaaS vendors or this. So it is also preventing the data, and also it is exposure through improper sharing, and preventing threats insertion and distribution. So these are all the competence issues for organizations responsibility in the real. So understanding is also the shared responsibility model and the virtualization security in the cloud is very important by the enterprise. So cloud-based enterprise uh, data is a magnet for malicious security threats from the attackers, both within this outside of the organization. So they will breach. It can be organization millions and even billions of dollars when lost revenue, business interruption, fines, penalties taken by this account. So the cyber attacks and the cloud data theft, because of increasingly the organizations, they may or not wonder who is to blame. They do not understand who to where it was happened if something. So the responsibility, they have to understand, they have to enable all security issues. So according to the recent report in this on the cloud user, they predicts 2025, the year full 99% of all cloud security failures will result from the user error. So the good news is, however, is that these issues are preventable in virtually all the cases when the user understands their roles and responsibilities in the cloud security. So that is why understanding uh, the security in the cloud, like public cloud providers like Amazon, they have no choice but to take their security and compliance responsibilities is very seriously. In the early days of cloud, it is different. Enterprises had initial concerns about the data security in multi-tenant architecture, security within the infrastructure, outside the enterprises, direct control was also a key consideration in that. Since then, however, Amazon and Microsoft have the assured users that their environments are as secure as no promises data centers, if not so. So shared responsibility is also an important issue in this cloud. Simply, we put the cloud provider is responsible only, no. So for the security of the cloud, while the customer is responsible for security in the cloud, so it is essential your cloud provider is responsible for making sure your infrastructure built within its platform and secure and reliable while in the virtual platforms. So to provide a secure cloud, the cloud vendor has to manage and controls the host operating system as well as the virtualization layer, and also they also guarantee the physical security of the facilities also. So they have to customize so many issues to ensure the security within the given cloud environment. The customer also configures and manages the security controls for the guest operating system, guest OS, including the security and including the updates as well as for the security group, firewall, and everything. So the cloud customer is also responsible for encrypting the data in transit at the rest. This is also the responsibility. So, for example, if you take the approaches like the shared responsibility model in our AWS Azure, they are also responsible for making kind of a fall, and they have the responsibility, regions responsibility, and availability zones, and also the locations of the AWS global infrastructure where the resources are located and everything. The second category, it is managing the software for the computing and the storing and networking. So they are looking in all kind of. They are not only giving just like a service. They are also in the background. There are so many security concerns. Security AWS is also shared responsibility model, I can say. So the customer responsibility falls into this. So the customer data stored in the cloud, and there are some kind of platforms and applications and identify the access management, and also these operating systems and networks and firewall configuration, everything will be considered. The AWS shared responsibility model will consider all these kind of. So they are considering about the description, encryption, and also some kind of authentication issues also. So these are the shared responsibilities for the any cloud provider in the cloud security. It has to be adopted by the prominent cloud provider as well, whether it is a public cloud responsible or private. So there are micro to prevent and to detect to prevent successful cyber breaches on this. Customer is responsible, and also the cloud provider is also responsible, and they have lots of the policies also included in this security governance policies also they are implementing. And and there are some kind of and what are the solutions? So in some of the solutions as we are discussing now, the attacks on virtualization environment. So it is different security solutions how also came into the in this environment, in this cloud already. They have designed and they are successfully running to protect from the to security breaches. So these security solutions for each of the component of this virtual architecture, every component is responsible, and every hardware guest side and host side. So to implementing the security solutions based on the attacks on this virtual environment. So it is based on there are three types of solutions also there. Service provider security is the one type of security solution, because the major providers are service providers. Service provider in the sense like the cloud service providers, those who are giving access through virtual manner. So what are the response? What kind of what is the solution of this? Service provider is one of the solution security. Unauthorized persons should not have any physical access to the virtualization hardware of the system. In order to protect virtual machine from unauthorized access by cloud administrators, so every virtual machine, each virtual machine can be assigned access control that can only be set through hypervisor. So there are some kind of principles it will follow to access control, like identification. This service level providers, they have to make sure that uh, some kind of access control, like identification and authentication and authorization. They will restrict admin access from unauthorized data from the system components. Moreover, if the administrator is involved in the security compromise, then access control implemented in the cloud can also be helped to identify the person. Web application attacks can also be prevented by this installing this application, a kind of layer and a firewall in front of uh, uh, a kind of web facing applications, and having the customer's code reviewed or any common vulnerabilities. In online, they have to identify identity management community, like OpenID has to be integrated with the open source cloud platforms, OpenStack, to provide identity management. See, these are all a kind of so there are some kind of issues like Gen and IP security tools. They enforce a kind of manifest. So these are the responsibilities, and the second security solution is a hypervisor security. So this is called HyperSafe. It is also a system that maintains a kind of a code integrity of the hypervisor, because it is a software related issue. It also extends the hypervisor implementation, and it also try to prevent its code modification if there is any changes by locking down or write protected or memory pages or something. So it secures the hypervisor against uh, you know the against the control flow, and also it is protecting hijacking attacks by protecting its code from the unauthorized access. So VM escape is also an example for this executing through a local physical environment. So therefore, this physical cloud environment must be prevented from inside attacks. So the interaction between the guest missions and host must also be properly configured. That should be made sure by the responsibility of this hypervisor. So this is the one of the solution during the configuration. In order to stop one virtual machine from affecting or communicating with other virtual machines, isolation, uh, it must be properly implemented and maintained by hypervisors. And moreover, uh, the other kind of possible attacks on hypervisors can also be reduced by hardening this hypervisor. So these techniques, including separating the duties of administrative functions, and restricting the hypervisor's administrators access to modify or create or delete hypervisor logs, and monitoring the hypervisor log regularly. So these are the solutions. And other type of solution, virtual machine security is also is a one solution for this virtual machine. Administrator must deploy a software or any application that stops virtual machine from using the extra resources, unless there is a authorized. So moreover, a lightweight process always must run on the virtual machines that will collect so much of logs from the virtual machines, and it will monitors them in a real life to fix any tampering of virtual machines. So the guest OS and applications which are running on it, it must be hardened by this by using the best security practices. So these practices, including installing security software like antiviruses or anti-spyware or firewall, and host intrusion, the prevention, HIPS we can call it as. So web applications, they are using this kind of to identify. So and also there is a one more is called a guest image security, is also another kind of security solution. So organizations using virtualization, it must have some kind of policy to manage and to creation and to usage the storage and deletion of images or something. So image files also can be scanned and detected viruses like spyware or any other kind of rootkits and other provides the security software running on it. So the proposed in this cloud admin and to recheck is the responsible. These are some of the solutions of the security issues, and there are some other security issues also. Security solutions also there. Trusted hypervisors. It is also underlying the component of all these architectures. In architectural level, it is also a new layer. This will also which needs to be also to be protected. This is also scale of deployment and deep watch hypervisors, other security issues, hyperguard and deep watch and domain zero hardening. So these are also the security solutions already they are implemented and they are using in the virtual environment, especially when they are working in the cloud-based applications. So other security issues also there, hypervisor security issues, and hypervisors are also they have also a kind of bugs. So those bugs also hypervisor are very gen is having 300K source lines of the code to implement this to control these attacks on the security and complete isolation and some kind of dome zero like they also must use this it runs on the commodity operating systems like gen. So security solutions Phoenix technologies they have their own security hypervisor integrity scanner in smm, and deepwatch is an intel project. They also have introduced this virtual toolkit scanner, and also dome zero is also virtual security solutions to harden. So these are the security issues, these are all the security issues. So the future of the cloud security, it is possible. It is all about the cloud security of the future is the future of the security on virtual platforms. So hypervisors, the future of the cloud security as the businesses become agile and they will use uh, virtual platforms even more in the cloud platform in the cloud computing for more applications related to this. So also this attack cybercrime is equally continues to rise. The organizations cannot risk storing this the little unsecure servers as they have to penalize from this data breach and it can exploit any kind of. So every modern business they understand it is a commodity to protect cloud infrastructure because the real asset of any business it is the data you shared in the cloud while you are accessing through virtual fashion by creating the virtual machines. The frequency of cyber attack is also increasing and many companies are resorting to hiring this kind of cloud security uh, uh, experts to discover and track any security problems during this. So there are many challenges in the securing the clouds and how securing the clouds. Uh, Still, they need lots of, especially virtual based platforms infrastructure. Cloud also they have their own network security. The organizations, the cloud based applications which are running the stores interacts or with the applications, they also have a kind of cloud deployment and cloud based platforms and cloud based security they are providing on their own, like cloud guard network we can call as, and cloud guard posture is also a kind of posture management. These are the solutions of workload. And also, so I would like to conclude the session. So at the end, so the security of the cloud, it cannot be maintained unless its virtualization environment is secure. So although there are different virtualization approaches exist, like bare metal approach, it is you commonly used in the large computing systems, like in the cloud for the server virtualization. Cloud virtualization environment can always compromised by the different attacks at service provider or hypervisor or virtual machines or guest operating systems and disk managers. So the attack scenarios at this type of these to provide the security virtualization environment. Generally, the requirements for virtualization security, different existing securities already there are many schemes that provide the security for the virtualization environment. How to already we discussed some of the solutions, and the responsibilities of the cloud is provided through the analysis security requirements and attacks. The solutions corresponding to others addressing these security aspects will lead towards the more extensive research on this kind of issues. So the cloud virtualization environment in future, the virtualization against the special effect. Virtualization is the at the heart of the cloud computing. Hardware and other kind of requirements, security and vulnerabilities are still a major issue, as highlighted by in our discussion. And enhancing the virtualization approaches for the more and effective and isolation and monitoring, like so the server in the cloud, the cloud providers and CPUs and GPUs are still they are all under the participation of to controlling the virtual security hardware related and some kind of against the specific attacks. So this is the all about the virtualization security in the cloud environment. So thank you so much for the session, and I hope this is open to you for the questions. Yeah, Sridhar. Timareddy, sir. I would like to end the session. Now this is open for questions too. I'm expecting some questions.
I request participants, if you have any queries, you can go with the queries.
Sri Lakshmi madam, I'm just waiting for the queries. If no one is responding, just I'd like to close the session.
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Good afternoon, one and all. I am P. Sri Lakshmi, Assistant Professor of CSC, G. Pullareddy Engineering College, Kurnool. It gives me a great pleasure to address concluding remarks. On the fifth day of 1 week FDP on cloud computing and its applications, organized by Department of CSC, G. Pullareddy Engineering College, Kurnool. First of all, I would like to thank today's speaker, Dr. T. Gopi Krishna Garu, for sharing important knowledge on virtual management rules, virtualization architecture, security issues in cloud, attacks in virtualization, security requirements, security problems, and their solutions. I would like to thank my team to organizing this 1 week LP and their enthusiastic and dedicated work, while I see that they put their heart to make this event happen. I would like to thank all the participants who have extremely cooperative in staying with us throughout the session. Thank you one and all for your cooperation. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Gopi Krishna, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, madam. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We'll wind up the session, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Okay.
This conference is no longer being recorded.